The InvescoQQQ Classic provided us with some great basketball this Saturday, but unfortunately for Jackson State fans, the men's basketball team continues to fall. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off doesn't mean the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. And these days, every new potential hire feels like it could be a high stakes wager for your company. And this is why we go to LinkedIn Jobs, because they make sure you get the right people for your team faster and for free. So go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. It's all about the InvescoQQQ Classic this episode. We'll look at the big comeback that Hampton made late against Howard. It was a really phenomenal game. I have a question, though, and it doesn't come from me, but it is something I wanted to expand on. Why don't we see women's basketball in these type of games? And why should we see women's basketball in these games? I have the answer to that last question. But I want to kick it off with Jackson State men's basketball because they continue to fall. And don't allow the opening to fool you. It's not separate. The InvescoQQQ Classic and Jackson State men's basketball. The opening game, because it was a doubleheader, the opening game was JSU versus Grambling. Now, maybe you weren't here on Thursday's episode, I believe it was. So I'll briefly set the scene for this game because I do believe context entering the game provides a lot of context leaving the game. So I was looking at this as a get your groove back game. Grambling, maybe that was a bit dramatic to say about them. They had only lost one game, but it was the fact that they were one of the better teams in the conference and they lost a game in dramatic fashion. So it was about how they lost, not just the fact that they lost. So that was a type of game where I feel like you wanted something to bounce back from. So you're looking to get your groove back there. Maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but not completely off. You wanted to get a bounce back performance. Then you look at Jackson State. Now, Jackson State was looking to get their groove back. There's no exaggeration about it. They had lost 2 games in a row coming into this game. Then you look at the fact that they had lost 3 of their last 4. Well, I kind of spoiled it. The fall is continued. So now instead of 2 games in a row, JSU is now looking at 3 games in a row that they've lost. They're looking at, instead of 3 of the last 4, they've now lost 4 of their last 5. They didn't get their groove back, but I want to talk to you about the 70-point threshold. I was searching for something. I wanted to see what was different because you got to remember, Jackson State started scorching hot. So what has been the difference in these last 5 games? They've lost 4 of the last 5. What's the difference between the games that they win and the games that they lose? And I only found one commonality, and it's not 100%, but it's almost 100. And it's 70 points being given up. And what's strange about it is it's not as if the offense can't score 70. It's not as if they need to have a great defensive performance in order to win. They've scored 70 points in a game and lost before. They did that against FAMU. They scored 86 points and lost by 2. They lost 88-86 to FAMU. This is just, I don't want to call it unlucky, but it just seems to be when the team in general, but when on defense they allow 70 points, they don't win these games. Let's break it down. They're 4-4 in conference play. In their 4 wins, Jackson State has given up 70 points one time, and that was an 88-80 victory over Alcorn to start the season. In their 4 losses, Jackson State has given up 70 points in every single game. It goes deeper than that. You look at the fact that I said they lost 4 of the last 5. Well, guess what? I said in the season opener, it was the only game that they allowed 70 points and didn't lose. That means against Texas Southern, they allowed less than 70 points. In their 5-game losing, or excuse me, in the last 5 games, they've allowed less than 70 points only one time, and they won that game. It's hard for me to feel like it's a coincidence at this point when it continues to happen. But then I decided to expand my search. I decided to say, you know what? Let's look at prior to the conference schedule. And it was more of the same. They were 4-9. Yeah, they were 4-9 out of conference. 3 of the wins, they actually allowed 70 points. So it was a little bit better, but in every single one of the losses, they allowed 70. I don't like to look at out of conference because it incorporates games against really big schools that you're designed to lose and things of that nature. So I really don't like involving it here, but I expanded my search just to show this is a repeated pattern. This is a repeated pattern. So I just thought that this was pretty strange. You give up 70 points and you lose. But here's my thing about Jackson State is they started off so strong that it still feels like their upcoming game against Southern is a big deal in the landscape of the SWAC. It's a big deal for them because you keep losing. You're pushing yourself farther and farther and farther down. You'll probably still make the tournament, so you just need to be hot around then. But nobody ever wants to be low on the tournament. Everybody wants to be as high as possible. You want to win as many games during the season. But this feels like a big game, and not because it's Jackson State versus Southern and the rivalry and all of that. It just feels like 2 really good teams. One's just on a slump right now. They're on completely different trajectories. You have Southern, who has the best record along with Grambling. Technically, Grambling is above them with tiebreakers. It's just those 2 at 6-2 on the season. But you have Southern, who has the best conference record in the SWAC. 3-game winning streak. You have Jackson State, not the worst team in the conference, but they're on a 3-game losing streak. Completely different directions. One's going up, one's going down. But for some reason, this still feels like a big game. This still feels like something I need to watch. This still feels like a game that if Jackson State won, I wouldn't be surprised. I would just be like, there goes the Jackson State we started the year off with. And that's what happens when you're good at the beginning. The beginning of the season can set a tone for a team and typically does set the tone for a team. Because if you struggle at the beginning and then you heat up, people are just waiting for you to revert back, especially if they didn't have expectations for you prior to the season. But if you start strong, then you fall off. People are like, I don't know. That team's still in there somewhere. No matter what happens, you always are going to have people who say the way you started is still there somewhere. And that's how I kind of feel about Jackson State. That team has to be in there somewhere. So let's see. Monday, tonight against Southern, something that is going to have some big ramifications in the conference. Are they able to hold the Jaguars under 70 points? That'll be the big question because it has seemed like more times than not, if Jackson State allows 70 points, they're going to lose. So we'll just wait. We'll be back with that on Monday. We won't be back tomorrow with it, but we'll be back with that on Monday to recap how the SWAC looks after Monday's action. But right now, I have a question. Where are the women at? Where are my ladies at? Because we've been in this InvescoQQQ Classic for 3 seasons, and we have yet to see a women's basketball game involved. Let's explore that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Now, if you're a small business owner, you need to be on LinkedIn. It's almost mandatory for you because you can post your job on there for free. No cost at you. There's no risk. It's only reward. And they also allow you to find the right people. You can start vetting who these people are. How do they fit within your team? If we're looking at basketball, I would like a facilitator. I would like some paint presence. I would like to have somebody on the perimeter. I would like to have all of these facets operating at peak performance on my team in order to be a championship squad. That's the same way that I look at businesses. I need somebody in this department, in this department, in this department. And if we're lacking in one of the departments, then trust that our team is lacking in general. You don't want to be lacking. Be a championship squad. In order to do that, you need to go to linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free and get a hold of one of the 800 million people who are on LinkedIn. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, for your second listen, you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day. Don't matter the time, you can check them out. Sports Network on YouTube. So go to Locked On Sports today and subscribe. But let's continue with the InvescoQQQ Classic Talk. This isn't about a game that was involved. This is about a game that is not involved. Women's basketball should be involved in these classics. And I want to give a special shout out to Live for Hoops, right? That's her name on Twitter. I don't know the first and last government name, but Live for Hoops on Twitter, because she mentioned something that I feel like should be a bigger conversation. And because I think it should be the bigger conversation, I want to try to be a part of having that bigger conversation. Let me know what you think. This is very important to me. This is something that I think is a big deal. We aren't seeing women's basketball involved in these type of classics. When HBCU ball is put on a national scale, it's not women. Obviously, they're not playing football, right? Like obviously they're not doing that. So there's no argument there. But it's the fact that football and basketball are the two sports that are heavily involved, and you're only seeing the men on the basketball side. So anytime the brand of HBCU athletic is being bolstered, it's only men that are getting the benefit of that. I know a lot of people say, oh, well, the school is the school. I don't necessarily agree when you look at sports. There's two things that I want to balance here, right? There's two things I want to balance: attendance and viewership. I went to an HBCU. When I was at Texas Southern, women's basketball games were not well attended. I checked them out, and I'll be honest with you, I checked them out probably occasionally second half. I wasn't there all day through both games. Now, when I started working, then I was, right? Like that was different. Matter of fact, I actually covered Texas Southern women's basketball as my first beat my junior year. That was my first assignment in journalism, period, right? And it was at that point that I started developing an interest. I'm not a big basketball guy as it is, so I was showing up for a lot of other things, but I wasn't showing up for the women's game. So when I see Jackson State versus Grambling, when I see Howard versus Hampton, I sometimes shake my head like, dang, I should have been the person who was forward thinking. I should have been Live for Hoops, who was asking, why isn't women's basketball a part of this? But once I heard it, it was like, yeah, that's a great question that I'm surprised, not surprised, but I'm disappointed I didn't think of it first. That's how you know it's good. When you be like, oh man, I'm disappointed I ain't think of that first. But that's how I felt about it. Balancing attendance versus viewership is something that I think is important. And I think I kind of got away from that a little bit. But it's how many people are going to show up. Because at the end of the day, TNT, and I say this as honest as possible and follow me through it, if you're going to involve women's basketball in the game, or in the classic, you have to be comfortable not immediately succeeding. I don't think, could I almost phrase it a different way? And that was like a last second change. You have to be comfortable not immediately succeeding. Not getting the numbers you want or having a little bit of a drop for that game in year one is not a failure. I kind of expect it, right? Because like I said, attendance hasn't been high. I don't know what attendance would be like, but I do know that you have to be comfortable taking the gamble, because the gamble feels a little bit smaller. And then also, you already kind of gambled using HBCUs. If I had to guess, that's how TNT would have viewed it. So let's get into both of those things. Women's basketball is a sport that I feel is seeing a rapid ascension. I feel like you're hearing more people vocalize their desire to watch it, vocalizing their enjoyment in watching it. I feel like you're seeing that more with the sport of collegiate women's basketball. So if you're seeing that more in general in the NCAA, why not allow HBCU women's basketball to get that same shine? It's going to rub off. I don't think people care about LSU and Iowa as teams. I believe that they cared about Angel Reese. They cared about Caitlin Clark. They cared about Fly J. Like, they cared about the stars on the team. I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I feel as if star power, individual star power, is stronger on the women's side when it comes to HBCU basketball. When I hear about the individuals that I hear the most about, Diamond Johnson, Zaay Green, I hear about them more than I hear about any guys. Now, I understand that the Invesco QQQ Classic is looking at school recognition. I get that. But could you imagine a game between Diamond Johnson, Zaay Green? Let's throw Staar Jacobs in there next year because she'd be on UAPB too when she returns from injury. Could you imagine those three women duking it out on national TV, on TNT? Because I think that would be something that'd be great. And when I say immediate success, I don't know what the viewership is going to be like, but that's the type of game that I believe people continue to talk about going into the following season. And that's how you continue to build and build and build. This is something that I believe is forward thinking and necessary. And I say it's a gamble because at the end of the day, no, it probably will not be as marketable as men's basketball. It just likely won't. I know the stigma behind it. I get it, right? There's probably going to be more casual people who would check out a men's basketball game than a women's basketball game. That's life. But dang, I ain't lying to you. I think we would have some really good action if we were to go that way. And I think the HBCUs are a gamble because, to my knowledge, I don't see TNT involved in a lot of college basketball games prior to March Madness. I don't see that a lot. I see it occasionally, but this is like the only time it really catches my eye. But I'll say that they do it a couple of more times to be safe. I would think that if you're going to do it, you would probably involve, as TNT, big schools. But they decided to go to the mid-major ranks on a consistent basis. Michael B. Jordan didn't hurt things by being the person behind it. InvescoQQQ didn't hurt things by being behind it. Like, there was a lot of other good aspects, but I would assume that TNT, as the network, probably said HBCU basketball, doubleheader, Saturday before the Super Bowl. Okay, let's try it. I don't think it was a slam dunk when it was brought to the negotiation table. A lot of the parallels can be made between HBCU basketball in general and now looking at HBCU women's basketball specifically. I think it's time to get them involved. I would love to see them get this shine, see them be able to build their brand, see them be able to get the same love and hopefully the same surge that women's basketball collegiately has got on a big school level. Now, as we push forward, let's look at that other game. We've looked at Grambling versus Jackson State. We've looked at the exclusion of women's basketball in these games and why there should be an inclusion. But now let's look at the finale. The finale of the Invesco QQQ Classic is now the finale of Monday's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. Yes, go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to make every moment more. And now, I don't know how you get down on a big day, but I know me. I'm sitting down. I'm kicking back. I'm probably going to go to Popeyes, give me the big box because they said that it ends on February 11th, and that's the same day as the Super Bowl. So I'll be watching the Super Bowl with my big box in hand, probably have it done by the end of the first two drives. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And then I'm going on to FanDuel. I'm trying to see, how many yards y'all think Travis Kelce going to get? Brock Purdy, how many yards y'all think he going to get? Brandon Ayuk, I think is going to be in line for a pretty nice day. Like, these are things. Patrick Mahomes, how many touchdowns will the GOAT in training be able to get? So when I have my Popeyes big box in my hand, when I have my water in my hand, because I'm on a water kick, but maybe I'll go lemonade that day since it's the big game. What do I think is going to happen? And I'll go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to make every moment more. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $200 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So it's all there in your favor. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And thank you 2 times for that. Now, there was two big stretches during Hampton's comeback victory over Howard. And the last game of the InvescoQQQ Classic came down to the wire, and it was a great one, right? It was one that was extremely entertaining, and it was kind of like an accordion. It was a battle of runs. Hampton was trailing the whole game. So Howard was just basically seeing their lead be extended right? Like extended and contracted, I guess, so to speak, but just it was getting bigger and smaller, right? Like that was Howard's lead throughout the entire second half. Matter of fact, Hampton scored the first bucket of the game, and they didn't lead the game again until 24 seconds left in the entire game. So you made the first basket, then you were in trail position pretty much the rest of the game. Like this was a major comeback, and it was able to snap a 13 game losing streak by Hampton. Now, there was an 18-5 stretch to close out the game, but I want to break it out into two individual 6-0 stretches by two different players. And both of these stretches were a part of 9-0 runs, and both of these stretches put together really is what makes up the 18-5 run. But when you break down each individual person's run, that's really the story of the comeback. So let's kick it off with Jordan Nesbitt, because his run came in response to a couple of major plays by Howard's Bryce Harris. Bryce Harris had a steal that led to a dunk. I thought it was a really well-timed steal. It was a big-time play, immediately followed by a Hampton turnover that happened so fast that I didn't know what happened because I had the sound off, and they were still showing Bryce Harris celebrating. I didn't even know the turnover. I was confused on how Howard had the ball when we came back from timeout. But when we did come back from timeout, that's when you were able to see the and one that was Bryce Harris yet again. So it was a layup and one three-point play the old-fashioned way. So Howard was on a 7-0 stretch. Game of stretches, like I told you, it's the accordion, expanding and contracting. But Nesbitt said, you know what? We're not doing this anymore. So he came up with his own and one, took it off the dribble from the top of the key. Then he had another and one that came from the fast break. And after that, before he even shot the free throw, he put up the finger to say hush to his teammates, and he put on the imaginary ski mask. And we should have known that's when things were different. Because after the 7-0 run that was primarily driven by Howard's Bryce Harris, it felt like that was Howard's opportunity to kind of put the game away. It just didn't happen because Nesbitt came back and immediately had a 6-0 run of his own. But like I said, that was a part of a 9-0 run that Hampton had in general. Then you go to the next one, because that's when the game got close. That's when Hampton, I feel like everything swung their direction. The ski mask was like, all right, it's our time now. We finna steal this game. But now you look at the next 6-0 run, and that came courtesy of Jerry Dang. Now, he must have visited Johnny before because he had ice in his veins, and it was clear because his back-to-back three-pointers are what finally gave Hampton the lead. Mind you, I told you, the Pirates scored the first bucket of the game. It was 2-0. After Howard scored to make it 2-2, Hampton didn't Hampton didn't lead this game again until 24 seconds left in regulation. And those two back-to-back threes were a part of giving them the lead. This was a phenomenal stretch. It's important to remember I'm identifying two individuals in Jordan Nesbitt and Jerry Dang who had 6-0 runs of their own. 6-0 runs of their own. Nesbitt, three-point play the old-fashioned way. Dang, three-point play from behind the arc, right? But this was all in all a part of an 18-5 stretch, really an 18-2 stretch, because they knocked down a three-pointer with the time expiring. That was so irrelevant. There was no chance you could have won the game. Hampton absolutely dominated Howard offensively and defensively to stop this game. And that's how they were able to win the matchup. Nesbitt actually knocked in the last 3 points. And in general, Nesbitt and Dang scored 15 of the last 18 points. Dang ended up being the team MVP for the game. He got interviewed. It just felt as if this was a monkey off our back. We had lost 13 in a row. We're facing our rival in Howard. We're going to go ahead and knock this out. This was a phenomenal game, and those two runs told the story. Nesbitt's calmed everything down and set the tone emotionally for Hampton to be able to come back. And then Dang's three-pointer, his 6-0 run, really was what clinched the comeback. That's the story of the 18-2 stretch or 18-5 stretch. Now, on tomorrow's episode, I got Gerald Huggins coming on. We was just kicking it in Frisco. We were there every day watching practice for the Shrine Bowl. So let's come on and talk about it now that the game is over. He has the grades for Donkwa, Anderson, and Victor, and then we also share how we felt about him. We already talked about this. This has already been recorded, and I can't wait to bring it to you tomorrow. I just wanted to make sure that we got this basketball information out before Monday's big time games. I can't wait for this week of action. I'm excited, y'all. I'm very excited to bring it all to you. In the meantime, in between time, all of these episodes, you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.